In my early 20s, I still lived with my family while pursuing graduate studies. After an evening out with the man who'd eventually become my spouse, I returned home. My parents and older brother Eric were in the living room, so I headed upstairs to chat with my younger siblings, Sarah and Laura, in their room. We were probably discussing my date and sharing the usual sisterly chit-chat when an unexpected thud sounded at the window. While Sarah and I registered the noise but brushed it off, Laura, who was nearer to the window, approached and drew back the blinds. What she saw made her scream in terror. Following her gaze, Sarah and I shrieked too. A man was peering into the room through the window, impossibly from the second story of our house. Panicking, we dashed downstairs, alerting our family about the intruder. Without hesitation, my dad bolted outside. My brother, hindered by a recent leg injury, couldn't join him. A few tense moments later, my dad returned. While he hadn't spotted the man, a ladder lay beneath the girl's window. The police were promptly called. They noted footprints leading into the nearby woods, but no substantial leads materialized. The only consolation was that the eerie man never appeared again. Flash forward 15 years. Now a mother of 3, I lived nearby my childhood home and worked as a nurse. During a particularly harsh snowstorm, a colleague and I hitched a ride with another coworker, as her husband's van was better equipped for the snow. Along the route, we noticed an older man, probably in his late 60s, trudging through the snow. He mentioned his car was snowed in and he was walking home. Wanting to help, we offered him a lift. During the drive, we discovered he lived on the same street I grew up on. When I shared my past connection to the street, he inquired about my old house. To my shock, he referenced the window incident, claiming he'd read about it in the newspaper. Only it hadn't been in the newspaper. I verified this later with my parents. While I could have dismissed his comment as faulty memory, the certainty in his voice and the details he recalled made me suspect he was the very man who had terrorized us that night. Although our encounter was brief and I never confronted him directly, subsequent conversations with my family only strengthened my belief. My dad vaguely recognized him as a former neighbor. The experience remains a chilling memory for all of us. To this day, Laura meticulously secures her curtains every night, avoiding windows after dark. Recalling the encounter decades later still gives me shivers. If my hunch about the man's true identity was right, how often had he been watching us unnoticed? A few years back, a peculiar incident taught me the importance of trusting my instincts. At 16, with a newly acquired driver's license, my friend Sadie and I reveled in the thrill of exploring abandoned houses. We had our share of misadventures, like encountering snakes or facing police warnings. But the most unsettling experience involved a bizarre couple. One day, Sadie and I stopped at McDonald's for a quick bite, a McChicken for me and nuggets for her. We settled in a local park, filled with families enjoying the weather, which was a comfortable 70 degrees Fahrenheit with a light breeze. Surrounded by folks, it seemed a safe space. But what transpired next was the last thing I anticipated. While engrossed in our meal and conversation, a man and woman approached our table. The man wore a seemingly warm blue jacket, while the woman's curly hair caught my attention. Though it's common for Southerners to chat with strangers, I felt an immediate unease. However, Sadie seemed oblivious to it. Initiating a rather obvious conversation, the man said, "Hi, what you doing? Having a little snack?" I felt my discomfort intensifying with the woman's smile. Sadie, a bit taken aback, replied, We're having lunch." Spotting Sadie's Rolling Stones t-shirt, he inquired, "So, do you like the Rolling Stones?" Hoping to divert the conversation, I remarked on how Sadie didn't really listen to them and only wore the shirt for style. Despite my playful tone, I couldn't shake off the feeling that these strangers were assessing us, almost predatory. The man, with an unsettling laugh, introduced himself as Jim, while the woman added, "They call me Alice." Their odd choice of words added to my growing anxiety. Determined to end the conversation, I bluntly told them I wasn't interested in sharing my name. However, Sadie hesitated before introducing herself. Seizing this as a cue, I promptly packed our food and led Sadie towards my car, ignoring any reactions from Jim and Alice. Sadie seemed perturbed, but we made a quick exit. Unexpectedly, she pointed out that the couple was sprinting towards us, possibly shouting. I refused to stop and instead warned a family entering the park about the duo. We then decided to inform the police. By the time we circled back, the strange couple had vanished. To this day, I can't place what felt so alien about the encounter. We weren't obvious targets, but their demeanor and urgency hinted at darker motives. I'm just grateful for my instincts that day, and the reminder that we should always trust our gut. In 2014, during my high school years, I became close friends with a girl I'll name Carly. With her long, vibrant red hair and dark eyes reminiscent of Bella Thorne, she had an infectious aura. Always adorned in colorful attire and earthy jewelry, her presence was synonymous with happiness and vibrancy. As we bonded, she introduced me to the thrill of exploring abandoned houses, taking countless selfies, and even invited me for sleepovers. Our friendship took an unexpected turn when, during one of our car rides, she leaned in to kiss me. This evolved into a recurring act, often filmed on her Snapchat. She claimed these videos were meant for her ex-boyfriend Michael. However, Allison, a mutual friend, confronted me, saying Carly had sent videos of us to her boyfriend Carson. Disturbingly, I was under the impression the recipient was an ex from another state. This was my first red flag. Around this time, I began seeing one of Carly's acquaintances, Garrett, which she openly disapproved of. During an outing with Garrett, Carly, in an unanticipated move, showed up with my recent ex-boyfriend in tow. With an unsettling intensity, she insisted I leave with her. Once inside her car, she shifted from fury to affection, showering me with declarations of love. Things took an even darker turn during my hospital stay for unrelated reasons. Garrett, my mother, and Carly came to visit. After a simple kiss from Garrett, my mother noticed a chilling transformation in Carly's eyes, which she later described as the embodiment of evil. On returning to school, Carly inexplicably ostracized me. Our once warm relationship turned icy overnight. To my horror, I later discovered that during my hospitalization, Carly had not only been intimate with my ex-boyfriend but had also partaken in vandalizing my house, as evidenced by the mysterious residue on my window and a text revealing their mischief. Confrontation yielded no clarity. Carly twisted the narrative, portraying herself as the victim. The climax of her deception came when she spread rumors of my suicide, painting herself as the bereaved friend. Years later, an old schoolmate, Maddie, shed light on Carly's duplicity. Maddie and Carly had grown close after my fallout with her. According to Maddie, Carly lured her into drug use and a night of intimacy, only to betray her by seducing Maddie's longtime crush shortly after. Maddie's revelation solidified my beliefs about Carly's true nature. The cheerful facade Carly projected concealed a disturbing darkness. She had an uncanny ability to draw people in, only to hurt them from close quarters. I'm grateful to be free from her web of deceit and manipulation. To the girl who portrayed us as soul sisters, I hope our paths never cross again. To give some background to my tale, back in the summer of 2019, I had a sleepover at my best friend's house, a tradition we cherished. We were both 15 then, living in a tight-knit village where everyone knew each other. It was the sort of place where unusual happenings were rare. Its residents were amiable and the area was deemed safe. One evening around 10 p.m., with the outside shrouded in darkness, our hunger pangs urged us to bake some cookies. However, lacking a few ingredients, we decided to make a trip to the nearby convenience store. It was only a short 5-minute stroll, albeit in near pitch-black surroundings due to the absence of streetlights. As we ambled, sharing light-hearted banter, we passed by an imposing church, a relic from the late 1800s. Although abandoned, it stood resilient, being a historic landmark. Opposite the church was a vast parking lot, dimly lit with faint orange lights, and across from that, our destination. As we walked by the church, a faint classical melody reached our ears. Curiously, we turned to the parking lot and were met with an eerie sight that still gives me chills. There, amidst the desolation, danced a man, tall, unkempt, with tattered clothing and an appearance suggesting he hadn't seen a shower in ages. He gracefully performed ballet movements, synchronized to the mysterious classical tune on that fateful summer night. Frightened, we instinctively switched to the other side of the road and hastened into the store. After hurriedly grabbing our ingredients, we recounted the chilling encounter to the cashier. She peered out to check, only to find no one there. Emerging from the store, our dread intensified as we realized we were phoneless and couldn't contact her father. Opting to take a detour through the residential lanes behind the store, we hoped to avoid any chance of another encounter. But fate had other plans. Reaching the main road, our hearts plummeted to see the man again, this time eerily dancing right in front of my friend's house. Overcome with fear, tears welled up in my eyes. Remembering a schoolmate lived nearby, we decided to seek refuge there. Initially, he was skeptical, probably owing to our age and the lateness of the hour, but upon seeing our distress, he agreed to escort us home. As we retraced our steps, the main street was, once again, devoid of the mysterious dancer. Grateful, we thanked our savior and darted inside, locking the world out. We recounted our harrowing experience to her parents, who brushed it off, suggesting our overactive imaginations had got the better of us in their peaceful village. Now at 19, the memory remains vivid, and the mystery unresolved. Darkness holds a new meaning for us, and though we occasionally revisit that night in our conversations, answers remain elusive. At 17, my room boasted a window that overlooked our backyard. The yard was enclosed, but beyond it lay a stretch of woods and a retention pond. This never bothered me. In fact, I kept the blinds up so that the morning sunlight would naturally rouse me from sleep. One night, engrossed in my phone with my dog resting beside me, something changed. Around 2 a.m., my dog abruptly started growling and barking at the window. Initially, I dismissed it as him reacting to his reflection, but I soon noticed his attention was directed to the window's left, while his reflection was to the right. With my bedside lamp on, the window merely reflected my room's interior, keeping the outside obscured. To avoid showing fear or alerting any potential presence outside, I feigned tiredness, placed my phone away, and switched off the lamp. Lying down and glancing out, what seemed like human eyes met mine from the window's left. Beside my bed, I had an empty water bottle. Grabbing it, I acted as if I'd just realized I needed a refill. Lighting up my lamp, I headed to my parents' room. My dad assured me there was no cause for alarm since our motion-activated floodlights hadn't triggered. Thus, with some reluctance, I returned to my room, persuaded myself it was just my imagination, shut the blinds, turned the lamp back on, and drifted to sleep. Morning saw me taking my dog out. On impulse, I inspected the pine straw right below my window and noticed distinct disturbances. Brushing off the uneasy feeling, I clung to my dad's reasoning about the floodlights. That belief was shattered later when a check revealed the floodlight bulbs had burned out. Since then, my blinds remain down and the lamp stays off during bedtime. I refuse to provide any uninvited spectator a view inside. And should there have been someone at my window that night, I hope our paths never cross again. Update. A heartfelt thanks to everyone who commented. This memory resurfaced due to a project I've been on, and sometimes penning it down and sharing feels therapeutic. Now at 22, I view it mainly as an eerie incident from my past, though a lingering paranoia remains, stemming from this and other experiences. To those with relatable tales, I genuinely hope you're in a better place now. From my interactions, you all exude resilience, and to anyone indulging in the creepy act of window peeping, kindly get lost. For some background info, I'm female and was 17 at the time of this story. I used to work at a pizza place in my hometown. The job sucked in many ways, but the worst part about it was that my manager had no problem leaving girls alone to close. Granted, the town I grew up in was small and boring, and many people left their doors unlocked, but I still thought it was risky. On this particular night, I was closing the shop alone at around 10. The last thing I had to do, on my way to my car, was take the garbage out, and the dumpster as well as my car were located on the side of the building. While I was making my way to the dumpster, I immediately noticed a man making his way towards me from across the shop's parking lot. He's wearing jeans and a black sweatshirt, and he had some sports cap on. Right off the bat, my heart dropped and I got incredibly nervous. I threw the trash away and began speed walking to my car when this guy says something. "You got a cigarette?" My paranoia told me that question was sketchy as hell, and I struggled to respond for a moment. I just said no and got to my car, hastily trying to get in. And I asterisked you. Not as soon as I closed my door, he booked it to my car and tried to open it. Obviously, I locked it immediately. I instantly started bawling and turned my car on. The man clubbed my window with his fists a few times without a word, before booking it again into the nearby streets. I called my mom and then the police once I got home, and they opened up a small investigation but could never find the guy. There were no other cases of something like this happening somewhere else in town, and so I think he probably relocated somewhere else to avoid being caught. I really have no clue what that man wanted to do. Sorry if this was kind of lame or anticlimactic, but it was pretty damn scary to me. So to the man who tried to get in my car, let's not meet again. In 2016, I found myself without a home and battling addiction, living in one of North America's most notorious skid rows. Most of my time was consumed in pursuit of my next fix, typically ending up in a park where many others like me, struggling amidst the opioid crisis, would congregate. While many of these souls were benign or even friendly, there was one young man who stood out. At first, he appeared to be just another quiet individual, but occasionally I'd notice his intense, vacant gaze, reminiscent of a predatory shark. It gave me an uneasy feeling. One day, this man's temper was ignited in what should have been a minor disagreement with another person in the park. While street fights were nothing new to me, the ferocity and rage that poured out of him was unlike anything I had seen. Even in my compromised state, it was evident that there was something deeply disturbing about him. A few months later, as I found shelter and started to rebuild my life, I saw him on the evening news. My intuitions were unfortunately correct. He had committed a violent crime in a nearby town, taking the life of a young girl and seriously harming another. The incident haunted me with countless what-ifs. I questioned if I could have done anything given my suspicions to the police. But looking back, I didn't have concrete evidence, and I doubted that authorities would have taken the word of someone in my then state seriously. In Massachusetts, I work at a rest truck stop that includes a 24-hour bathroom and a gas station. One night after my shift at the adjacent restaurant, I hung out with my friend Jake, Tilde 30 years old, who was manning the gas station. As the evening progressed, there weren't many customers. We generally kept an eye on the entrance, especially if we were doing something that we didn't want others to see. Around 1:30 a.m., a couple of cars pulled in. I noticed a lady with a young girl, probably her daughter, coming from the pumps, and another car parked directly in front of Jake's window. The woman and her daughter walked towards the store, with the young girl seemingly headed towards the bathroom. At the same time, a man emerged from the car in front of Jake's window and also approached the store. It was the man's sudden shift in direction towards the bathroom after spotting the young girl that caught our attention. I whispered to Jake, pointing out the man's strange behavior. Jake's alarmed look confirmed my suspicion. Despite being in a more urban area, many state troopers frequently visit our location, but none were present at that moment. Unsure of how to proceed, I went into the dining section of the rest stop, a space I was familiar with due to my work at the fast food restaurant. I peeked around to the restroom's location. The men's room was immediate to the left and the women's was further down. I noticed the man bypassing the men's and heading towards the women's restroom. Worried, I unlocked the door and confronted him, resulting in a physical altercation. In the ensuing chaos, I called 911 explaining what had happened. State troopers arrived within minutes. After reviewing the CCTV footage, they spoke to me. They unexpectedly told me, any driver who is stopped by a law enforcement officer for a traffic violation and is not wearing a safety belt can be fined $25. They then fined me $25. The relevance or the reason behind this statement and the fine remains a mystery to me. I never learned of the man's fate or intentions. I don't consider myself a hero, but I hope that my actions that day made someone reconsider their choices. I grew up in a town surrounded by lush green walking and biking trails. My childhood home was a mere 10-minute stroll from these nature trails. Consequently, I often found myself outside, absorbing the beauty around me. Anthony, a close friend who lived in a nearby neighborhood, was often my partner in our outdoor escapades. On days when I felt like exploring, I would just walk over to Anthony's place to see if he was up for some biking fun. On one sunny day, both of us decided to bike to the local lake, a hub of activity during the summer months. A trail, adjacent to the town's library, served as our path to this lake. Near the start of this trail was a tunnel running beneath a road, which we thought would be an ideal spot to chill, thanks to its shade and the echoey ambience perfect for blasting music from our iPods. This tunnel was about 20 feet long, and aside from a paved path on one side leading up to the main road, there were no easy exits, especially if you had a bike. On this day, while we lounged opposite to the trail entrance with our music playing, I spotted a man making his way into the tunnel from the trail's entrance side. As he got closer, he announced himself. "I'm a Mount Prospect police officer." But something felt off. He was clad in casual attire. Cargo shorts, a green tank top, sandals, and had a big backpack. His greasy skin and messy hair added to my suspicion. Every instinct in me screamed danger. I turned to Anthony, panic evident in my voice. "Anthony, run!" Anthony tried to bolt toward the trail entrance, the very path this man was obstructing. As he raced past, the man made a grab for Anthony but seemed more interested in me. Seeing Anthony get away, I assessed my escape options. I spotted a narrow dirt path on our side of the tunnel. I hastily tried to maneuver my bike up this trail, but it grew too thin, forcing me to abandon it. As I sprinted, the man's voice echoed behind me, shouting about respect for the police. He gave chase, but soon gave up. Reaching the library, I looked back from a vantage point and watched him ride away. On my bike. I reported the incident to the police, and when they presented a lineup of suspects, I instantly recognized the man. It turned out he and his twin, both homeless and struggling with meth addiction, were infamous in our community for bike thefts. Reflecting on the incident, I shuddered at what could have been. Given his erratic behavior due to substance abuse, things could have taken a violent turn very easily. It all began when my friend found my journal. You know, the embarrassing one you kept as a kid where you wrote about how much you disliked your family? Yeah, I had one of those, and it was unfortunately, or perhaps more than unfortunately, discovered. But let me go back a bit. Since we were young, my companion displayed peculiar behavior. She wouldn't speak, instead staring into space for hours. It seemed like she was conversing with someone in her mind. She'd giggle, and then return to that vacant gaze. My parents were worried, but doctors brushed it off as normal development and claimed she'd grow out of it. We all decided to overlook this strange tendency of hers. Over time, she did improve. I noticed my parents gradually relaxing as she became more lively, behaving like any other girl her age. She occasionally slipped back into her trance, but we considered it progress. After all, old habits die hard. The day she finally grew out of it was the same day she found my journal. "Olivia, you're dead!" She burst into my room, flinging the diary at my face. Ouch. I quickly picked it up, my heart sinking. I had written things that should have stayed hidden forever. But now they were there. Hateful words exposed to my twin's angry eyes. The diary tore as it hit me, pages flying in all directions. Amidst them were pictures of a girl with her eyes crossed out and her tongue sticking out. Wait, let me explain. I was young. Young? Her eyes reddened even more as she glared at the scattered pages. She stomped on one of the drawings and pressed her foot against the floor. "Okay, so you hate me that much? I'll make sure you despise me so intensely that you'll wish you were dead." She turned, slamming my door, shaking the walls. I looked down at the drawing. It now portrayed a severed head. I thought she was bluffing. After all, what could a 16-year-old girl really do, apart from maybe smashing some plates and blaming it on me? I tidied up my room and went to sleep. The next morning, while brushing my teeth, I received a text from her. "Come downstairs." I rolled my eyes, expecting another trick. I sighed and descended the stairs, anticipating a punishment like having my phone confiscated. The stench hit me first. It was repulsive. Imagine a homeless man who hadn't bathed for 40 years getting sprayed in the face by a skunk. Ugh. I was surely going to be grounded for a week. Pinching my nose, I saw mud smeared all over the tiles. But there was something else too. Something that made my heart plummet. Blood. It was everywhere, the floor, the walls, even the ceiling. My phone. Where's my phone? I need to call 911. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Her voice sounded right behind me. I spun around, facing her smirk. Blood streaked her face, staining the white dress she'd gotten for her 14th birthday. Okay, so my friend was behind this. Maybe it was just a prank. I reassured myself, desperately seeking the best-case scenario. Just a joke, and the blood isn't really blood. It's just ketchup or something. My thoughts scrambled, attempting to convince me that it was a harmless stunt gone awry. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't the case. Something dreadful had occurred, and my friend was responsible. "What did you do?" I tried to sound firm, but my voice trembled. A grin spread across her face as she started playing with her hair. "Oh, nothing much. Just that our beloved parents happened to run outside in the middle of the night and unfortunately fell into a dumpster." Her voice trailed off, and a shiver ran down my spine as her grin grew even wider. "Filled with trash bags full of knives. I don't recall what happened next. I think I screamed. We shoved each other, a lot of blood, and the mangled corpses of my mom and dad. I might have blacked out. I'm not sure. What I do know is that when I woke up, the house was pristine, not a speck of dirt, not a single thing out of place. The only evidence that I hadn't dreamt the whole thing was the conspicuous absence of my parents. She didn't stop there. Next was my boyfriend, then my best friend, then the dog, then the neighbor. You might wonder why I didn't call the police. I tried, several times. I even attempted to contact the FBI, all in vain. Each time my friend lured me to a scene of carnage, but the police found nothing but normal surroundings. They acknowledged the missing individuals, but they insisted on filing only missing person reports. Without evidence of their deaths besides my testimony, it was useless. Even if they were deceased, I was the prime suspect. After all the missing persons were somehow connected to me. I was the one who repeatedly called, describing the gruesome scenes. I was the one they discovered at the supposed crime sites unconscious. I told them it was my friend, but they grew skeptical. I was declared insane and confined to a psychiatric ward. But I know I'm not. I know. When I space out, I hear her laughter. She taunts me, coaxing me to kill a nurse instead of staring at a wall. She insists I know how to clean up after a crime. On Monday, August 4th, the kitchen windows buzzed with the activity of 4 flies. Swiftly, I grabbed a fly swatter, tidying up the scene before continuing with my day as usual. Summer, I thought while driving to the nearby grocery store, always brings an influx of flies. When my spouse returned home that evening, I welcomed them warmly. They inquired about my day and activities as they surveyed the meticulously maintained house. Heading towards the kitchen with phones in hand, they muttered without looking up. "Killed 4 flies in here today." 4 flies? They questioned. Yes, precisely 4. Never seen so many flies indoors before. They paused to consider. Maybe we should take the trash out, they murmured, striding to their office without raising their eyes. Sighing, I pressed the pedal on the trash can to gauge its fullness. No, I had already taken it out that morning. Besides a lone piece of paper, it was empty. Our abode had unfortunately earned a reputation for unwelcome pests, annual ant invasions, spiders in every corner. Depending on the season, there was always something lurking in the shadows. So that night, I embarked on a mission to locate any openings. Armed with a flashlight, I meticulously scoured every crevice. Sometimes I found traps for dust or pet hair, other times a spider's delicate web, but never a fly. As I peered into a corner of the dining room, a hand gripped my shoulder. "What are you doing, dear?" "Searching for where those flies might have come from," I exclaimed, straining to peer into the tall hole. My partner gently took the flashlight from my head and directed it into the crevice. "Nothing here, you should rest. You've got a big day ahead." I retreated to our master suite, deflated but content to call it a night. Tuesday, August 5th dawned with me squashing 15 flies in the kitchen. Clad in a bathrobe with hair and rollers, I wielded the swatter in a frenzy against the flurry of flies at the window. My breath was heavy as curses flowed from my lips, directed at my tiny adversaries. One after another, I delivered the blows of justice with my yellow daisy fly swatter. After the commotion settled, I calmly prepared for the day, sipped my small cup of coffee, and drove to the downtown hardware store. "Need help finding something, ma'am?" The elderly shop owner stocked shelves while soft jazz played in the background. "Fly paper?" I ventured, admitting my home's secret infestation to a stranger. "Aisle 6. I grabbed the first item I saw, checked out quickly, wary of the neighbors discovering our hidden shame. I carefully hung the sticky strips by the kitchen's large window, satisfied with the death trap's placement. No more games. I meant business. Upon their return home that evening, my partner reeked of cigarettes and bourbon. Despite quitting smoking years ago, they now bore the scent of an ashtray. A disheveled tie and a mischievous grin accompanied their approach to the wet bar where I sat. "Max, I killed 15 flies in the kitchen today. Oddly enough, I had to go to the hardware store for fly paper. I was so... You look stunning tonight." Their words oozed out like molasses. "Thank you, darling, but I need to discuss something important." "Want some fun money for the weekend? Perhaps for a stylish dress? Your big day, you know." Bursts of laughter punctuated their words as they sauntered toward the patio, cigarette in mouth and mischief in their eyes. On Wednesday, August 6th, a glass shattered as I beheld the state of the flypaper in horror. Black masses writhed and buzzed, a hypnotic spectacle. Their collective noise nearly deafened me, as if they screamed inside my mind, trapped on heavy-duty Scotch tape. I maneuvered around the glass shards, keeping my eyes on the nauseating display of a fly orgy. I approached with utmost caution, repulsed beyond measure. Grabbing my phone from my handbag, I dialed Max's number. "Hello? Josie? Is this an emergency?" Max whispered hurriedly. A meeting awaited them, but I didn't care. "Max, the fly tape. It's covered. Completely covered by flies. It's disgusting." "I can hardly bear to look at it," I exclaimed, my gaze fixed on the repugnant scene. "Josie, it sounds like the tape is doing its job," they replied curtly. "Max, that's not the point, and you know it. How about I send you more money? Get yourself a new pair of shoes for your big day." "Fine. Goodbye, darling." Their hush money held no value to me at that moment. I was determined to end this. Thursday, August 7th brought unbearable stench and flies pervading every room of our home. Whatever unfortunate creature was decaying beneath our abode emanated a nauseating odor exacerbated by the relentless heat. As my partner prepared to leave for the office, I approached hesitantly. "I believe something has perished in our crawl space. The smell is terrible. Do you notice it too?" "Maybe. Doesn't seem likely. That's never happened before," they replied undeterred, while fixing their hair and scrutinizing themselves in the mirror. "Hannah mentioned it smells like rotting flesh. I'm inclined to agree. I'm contacting an exterminator to assess the situation. Whatever it is, the smell is worsening." Their gaze fixed on me in the mirror, and I sensed they were silently studying my eyes for a prolonged moment. "Don't bother. I'll look into it this weekend. Besides, it's your special night tonight. Be ready by 7 p.m. A peck on my cheek, and they were gone, unaware of our death-infused home. I knew I should heed their words, trust their promise, but I had witnessed too many weekends claimed by the boys. I couldn't endure this nightmare any longer. Waiting until their car disappeared from sight, I retrieved my phone and embarked on a search that would irrevocably alter my life. Randy, a man with half his teeth intact, arrived in a van adorned with a crudely painted deceased possum. Diesel fumes and sun-drenched skin were his trademarks. With a warm smile, he greeted me, bringing a sense of comfort despite the circumstances. "Hello, Mrs. Wright. I'm here about the critter in your crawl space." Taking him around to the side nearest the kitchen, I couldn't bear to expose my neighbors to the putrid scent radiating from the house. "The stench has been strongest in the kitchen. It could be originating from under here." Randy set down his tool bag, adjusting his pants. Letting out a deep breath, he crouched down. "Phew!" He wafted the air, then crouched deeper. "That's putrid. You might have a whole critter family down here." My heart sank at the notion of multiple deceased animals beneath our dwelling. How did they get there? How many were there? My thoughts whirled until Randy's voice broke through. "I'm going to go in and see what I can find." With that, he entered beneath the back deck, his worn boots peeking out from the darkness below. I could hear his grunts and sighs as he worked his way deeper. "Do you see anything yet?" "Not yet, ma'am, but the stench is intense. I must be getting close." I waited in anticipation as my savior, Randy, attempted to uncover the source of the evil plaguing us. Suddenly, his voice fell silent. No movements, no grunts, just stillness. "Randy, are you okay down there?" More silence, no response. "Randy?" Then a flurry of panicked yelps and cries erupted as Randy scrambled his way back toward the deck. Knocks, labored breathing, frantic scraping. Then he burst out, ashen-faced, his eyes wide with shock. "Randy, what did you see?" Without uttering a word, Randy fled. I grabbed his bag of tools and raced after him. "Randy, what happened? Where are you going?" His van's door slammed shut, the engine roared to life, and within seconds he was gone. Dust swirled where his vehicle had been parked. Enough was enough. I needed to know what Randy had seen, why he had left without explanation. Already dressed for the evening with Max, hair and makeup meticulously done, heels fastened, I knelt in the cold, damp earth, tracing Randy's steps. I retraced his path using my phone's flashlight as my guide, tears streaming down my face. Dirt and mud soiled my dress, my heels undoubtedly ruined. But that was the least of my concerns. I needed to uncover the truth. Upon reaching the first gruesome discovery, an expired squirrel, I continued onward. Then I spotted a foot human. My heart pounded as I stared at the lifeless flesh devoid of vitality. Beyond the foot lay a body, the remains of a young man, likely in his early 20s. Glasses, blonde hair, a tattoo of a sunset on his arm. In his left hand he held another hand, belonging to a young woman, her hair blue, her nails black. Both of them were robbed of life's spark, eyes vacant and lifeless. Tears blurred my vision as I stared at their forms. I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't unsee it. I backed away slowly, my flashlight fixed on them, as if willing them to miraculously awaken. But I knew better. Their fates were sealed. As I retreated to the entrance, a figure emerged. A man in a suit, a loosely tied tie around his neck, in his hand an axe. A sinister smile spread across his face as he entered the opening, blocking the golden hour light. "Darling, you couldn't wait for me? I told you tonight was your special night." I've been working as a barber for nearly 15 years now. My grandpa had also been a barber, and some of my most cherished memories involve sitting in one of his chairs, enjoying candy while he chatted with the locals. He used to say, "Johnny, I'm not just cutting hair. I'm also a therapist, a lawyer, a political advisor, and a professional secret keeper." And once in a while, he'd say, taking out a bottle of hair dye, "I can temporarily turn back the clock." That was what I admired most about my grandpa, his trustworthiness. People would sit down in his chair and open up about anything. I learned about politics, sports, gossip, and even the secret behind the mayor's jet black hair in our small town. I realized that cutting hair was my true calling. When my grandpa passed away, I decided to take over his small shop and carry on his legacy. My family was surprised, considering I had been working at a prestigious salon in LA. However, sentimentality won over practicality. Some of his clients transitioned to me, and I continued exactly as he had left it. I retained the faded black and white tiles and the well-worn barber's chair, preserving the comfortable atmosphere for my customers. It was all about them, and I cherished each interaction. Except for one, Dwayne Corliss. My grandpa had known him from childhood and used to cut his hair about once a month, even though he was mostly bald. What made it even stranger was that my grandpa never engaged in conversation with Dwayne while cutting his hair. He seemed uneasy in his presence. Dwayne would pay in cash and leave the shop swiftly. He was always an odd character, my grandpa mentioned while I was sweeping hair off the floor. He has a son around your Uncle Nate's age, but I rarely see him. I hadn't expected Dwayne Corliss to still be alive, but one autumn afternoon I heard the door chime, and there he stood, staring vacantly into space. He looked like he had just come out of a severe cold, feeble, frail, and barely breathing. A few strands of white hair clung to his head. "Don Jenkins at Brookshire's told me about you taking over," he muttered softly. "I need a haircut, please." I led him to the chair, fastened the cape around his wiry, wrinkled neck, and he gazed at himself in the mirror the entire time. His expression twisted. He hardly blinked, only nodding occasionally to indicate he was content with the progress. The whole cut took less than 5 minutes. Dwayne handed me a crumpled $10 bill and shuffled toward the door. "Perhaps I'll see you next month," he mumbled before exiting. I almost pitied Dwayne, but I suppressed the feeling and proceeded with my next customer. I asked Steve Robinson, a lawyer familiar with everyone in town, about Dwayne's well-being. "Dwayne stopped by, huh?" Steve began. "He's been having health issues. I think his son moved in with him recently." "Yeah, my grandpa mentioned he had a son. What's he like?" "David, that's his name. He's decent, I suppose. He went to community college with my daughter Janine in the 90s. Then he left town. Dwayne mentioned he got a new job." "Is he employed?" "Can't say for sure. He's in and out of town a lot." I shrugged and continued with Steve's haircut. A couple of weeks went by, and I forgot about Dwayne Corliss until he returned precisely a month later. This time, I was determined to engage him and reconcile with my grandpa's previous discomfort. "Hello, Mr. Corliss. Same as usual?" Dwayne smiled softly and settled into the chair. I attempted to strike up a conversation and managed to extract a few words from him. He was nowhere near the pariah he'd been portrayed as. I felt guilty and decided to make amends by providing him with the best experience possible. Although he didn't talk much, it was evident he appreciated the conversation. I continued cutting Dwayne's hair for the next 5 months until one day, he entered looking frailer than ever. I inquired about his health, but he brushed aside my concerns. Cut it all off this time, he croaked. I want to try the bald look for a change. In under a minute, I had shaved off the last remnants of his hair. Dwayne rubbed his near-mummified fingers over his smooth scalp and grinned. Thanks, Johnny. This looks great. Tears welled in my eyes, as I somehow sensed this would be our final encounter. Dwayne handed me a $10 bill and left with a simple wave, his parting words missing. 2 weeks passed and I received a call from Steve Robinson. Hey Johnny, wanted to let you know that Dwayne Corliss passed away. No service, but I thought you should know. Damn, I replied, he was a good guy, a loyal customer. We might have even become friends. But that's not exactly why I'm calling, Steve continued. You know, I'm practically the town's lawyer. I handled Dwayne's will and, well, he left you a substantial amount of money. I rushed to Steve's office, my mind racing. I hardly knew Dwayne. Why would he leave me anything in his will? Steve noticed my confusion and poured me a glass of bourbon. There's something else you need to see, he began and handed me a letter with shaky handwriting. Dear Johnny, I wanted to thank you and Nelson for taking care of me all these years. Since Nelson is gone, I want to leave this gift for you. Hopefully you can spruce up the shop. My only request is that you cut my son Davy's hair too. It's always so messy. D.W. Corliss. You'll get the money either way. This was more of a suggestion, not a condition, Steve clarified. But I have a feeling David needs someone to talk to, just like his father did. And well, off the record, Dwayne didn't leave much for his son. Not even close to what he left you in the church. My gut churned, and I nodded as Steve jotted down David's address. David might still be there, though I'm not sure if he's in town. I think I have his number somewhere. I drove to David's house and left the shampoo in his mailbox. But there was no mailbox, so I headed up the gravel road to leave it on his porch. The door was partially open and I called out for David, but there was no response. I placed the package inside and turned back to my truck, hearing a faint sound from inside. I opened the door and my heart raced. Under the window a long dresser stood, adorned with 5 decaying mannequin heads. Each wore a wig, all of them blonde. I approached the dresser, studying the wigs. They appeared well crafted, not made from synthetic hair. The last wig resembled David's hair when he first visited my shop, complete with the scissor marks on top. Why was he having me cut wigs? Did he aim to create the perfect disguise? The thumping sound drew me to a room at the end of the hallway. Inside, I found a tied-up man in the bathtub, his scalp removed. I immediately called 911 and placed a towel over him to stem the bleeding. When David returned home, the police were waiting. He looked at me with a grin. I made it look real, didn't I, Johnny? Davy's trial began and I attended, watching as he was led away in handcuffs. He turned to me and smiled, sending shivers down my spine. For once, I was grateful for my brown hair. Let me tell you about something seriously strange that's been happening in my house. You know how every room has an entrance, right? It doesn't need to be fancy or anything, but it's like a fundamental thing. A room just isn't a room without a way in and out. Well, guess what? There's an exception to this rule, and I've had the weirdest experience with it. This exception is hidden deep within my own home. Like, I don't even know exactly where it is, but I'm sure it's close by. I've heard noises coming from it, and yes, I've been inside myself. Here's the backstory. I have a sister, and our parents have 2 daughters. Despite being the older one by a year, I was the last to move out and get my own place. And guess what happened just days after I moved in? I was just casually going down the stairs, a simple and boring activity that we never really think about. You know, from point A to point B. But what if point C messes things up? What if we're not paying attention to where we're going? Each step was making these weird creaking noises under my feet. Not a big deal for me, but this time they were louder than usual. Maybe I was too lost in my thoughts because on the last step I tripped. Not a full-on fall, but I stumbled and lost my balance for a second. And then, like the house sensed my brief distraction, things changed. The walls around me turned this kind of old off-white color, and the paint was all cracked and peeling. The floorboards were rough and visible, and even through my socks I could feel the wood digging into my skin. The air was thick, musty, and dusty, and there was this odd brightness in the room, even though I couldn't spot any light source. It felt like it was radiating from this weird wooden pillar at the center of the room. In a corner, there was this ancient dusty mattress that I wouldn't want to sleep on even if it was clean. Honestly, I was beyond confused. I instinctively wanted to retrace my steps, but come on, this was my own house. I couldn't have gotten lost, right? So I turned around to head back up, but you won't believe it. The stairs were just gone. Instead of the stairs, there was, well, nothing. Absolutely nothing. No sign of any way in or out. No windows, no stairs, and definitely no doors. I started feeling claustrophobic. My mind stopped trying to figure it out and went into full-on escape mode. But escaping an impossible room isn't the easiest thing. My heart was racing and I literally sat down on the floor trying to slow things down. All my thoughts were just focused on those damn walls. They weren't moving, but man, my fears sure were. When my knees hit the floor, it was soft, almost like wool. And as I focused my eyes and calmed down, I realized I was back in my hallway. Sunlight was streaming in through the window, reminding me that I could just leave whenever I wanted. So I did the only sensible thing. I went for a walk outside to clear my head. I didn't tell anyone about this right away. Honestly, I kind of let it fade into the background of my mind. After a few days, I stopped thinking about it. Not that I forgot. I mean, how could you forget something like that? I just pushed it aside. But then, my sister stumbled upon the room. Just 5 days after my little adventure, she came over to see my new place for the first time. I promised her a tour, but guess what? The house had other plans. I remember being in my bedroom just cleaning up a bit. She used to have the neater room as a kid, and a small part of me wanted her to notice how mature I was living on my own. I wasn't making any noise. I would have heard her knock on the door, right? But instead of a knock, I heard her scream. It wasn't echoing. It was like her scream was creeping up through the walls. Her voice was all around me as I sprinted downstairs. "Help!" she yelled. "Where are you?" She sounded completely freaked out. "Where are you?" I shouted back, which in hindsight was totally unhelpful. I didn't even give her an answer, but in the moment, all I cared about was finding her. Even on the ground floor, her voice still sounded distant. I rushed outside to the garden thinking it might help, but guess what? The sound was still coming from inside the house. I turned around and walked back inside, and boom, there she was in the hallway. We grabbed each other in relief. Where the hell was I? She sounded as shaken as I was. A room with no doors? Her silence said it all. She had seen it too. And then she started explaining. "I knocked, but you weren't answering, so I let myself in. The place looked kind of off, but I thought nothing of it. Classic example of not paying attention to your surroundings, right? And then, as I was closing the door behind me, it just vanished. I ran around, and then suddenly I ran into you, and the room was gone." We sat down, and I told her about my own experience. We told our parents too, but of course they just brushed it off as some ghost story. "Spooky," was literally the first thing our dad said. They couldn't take the whole thing seriously because it was just too bizarre, but their tunes changed when they came to visit a few days later. It didn't happen right away, but it didn't take long either. My parents had been sitting on the couch for like half an hour when my dad asked, "Where's the bathroom?" "Upstairs, first door on the left. You can't miss it." Honestly, I felt a bit guilty. Deep down, I knew he'd end up finding the room, and when he came back, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. My mom looked at him all concerned. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Are you okay?" She got up and walked over to him, asking if he was all right. "He's seen the room," I told her. She looked puzzled, so my dad jumped in. "The one without any doors." Later, when they were leaving, my mom experienced it too. As they were heading out the front door, one moment my dad was holding her hand, and the next, she was just gone. But like all the other times, she came back a moment later, clearly shaken. And guess what? Every single person who visits gets a ticket to the room. There are no exceptions. It doesn't matter if they're family, friends, delivery people. They all see the room before they leave. It's been like this for 3 years, ever since I moved in. It's actually become kind of charming in a weird way. But last night, things took a new turn. I was out with some friends and I met this guy. He seemed nice and oddly familiar. We chatted, and I ended up telling him about the room. "Sure, that's a good one," he said with skepticism. I grinned and played along. "Well, how about you see for yourself?" So he came back to my place. But something was off. He looked super pale just from seeing the house. I told him there was nothing to worry about, and he reluctantly followed me inside. But here's the kicker. He didn't see the room. It takes some people a bit longer. Let me give you a tour, maybe that'll speed things up. I showed him around, and when we got to my bedroom, he grinned at me. "Maybe it'll happen in here?" I smiled back, thinking I was about to prove him wrong. But as I turned around to open the bedroom door, he vanished. I spun back, and he was gone. Oh my God. I heard his voice echoing through the walls. Where am I? I told you. Do you believe me now? Yeah. How long does this last? Usually around a minute, I chuckled. But there's an exception to every rule. As time passed, I started getting worried. After an hour, he was practically begging for help. It's been a whole night now, and his voice has gone silent. This room that always sent people back has somehow kept him. It's not releasing him like it does for everyone else. And honestly, I wish I could have helped him somehow. But where would I even start? Calling the police wouldn't have made sense. How do you explain that your house kidnapped someone? I spent the entire night talking to him, trying to guide him out. But we both knew he wasn't getting out until the room allowed it. Towards the end, he just gave up. He started talking about regrets, about doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. At the time, I thought he was talking about coming to my house, but looking back, I think he meant something else entirely. He kept saying, "She's going to keep me here." Was he talking about me? Or did he know something I didn't? Here's where it gets even weirder. I did some digging and found out he was the previous owner of the house. Maybe I subconsciously recognized him, which is why he seemed so familiar. I never met the old owner before buying the place, but I must have seen him somewhere. And get this, I found an old listing of the house from a few years back. The original floor plan had a basement, something my house doesn't have now. Could that basement be the room? Today, a friend of his came over and asked if he was still around. I told him he left in the night. His friend walked in. He didn't see the room. The room with no doors has its prisoner now. It's not letting anyone else in. When Sammy fell ill, it was like stepping into a twisted mirror universe. We had been well off with 2 full-time jobs and a carefree, childless lifestyle, so transitioning to a single income was jarring. The insurance companies managed to weasel out of covering more than half of Sammy's treatment, which was infuriating. Sammy handled it all with grace and determination. We had our ups and downs during countless doctor visits, but progress was slow. The doctors always promised the next time would be better, but it seemed like we were running out of time. As a year passed, Sammy's condition worsened. The catastrophic had become tragically routine. I did my best to keep her spirits up, but her light was fading. We hardly spoke anymore. A coworker of mine named Barry was throwing a bachelor party. I wasn't planning to go, but Sammy insisted. "You need a break," she smiled. "Do something normal for a change." I resisted, but seeing her smile after weeks was enough to persuade me. She was happy that I still had friends outside of our troubles. How could I refuse? I agreed to be the designated driver, assuring her I wouldn't be gone for long. She seemed content, though it was more for my sake than hers. In November, I boarded a party bus headed for Annapolis. Barry was going all out with drinks, dinner, and casino games. I tried my luck at the tables, winning big in blackjack after months of setbacks. It felt invigorating to finally win. As the night progressed, the party grew wilder. Eventually, Barry's huge hotel room became the after-party hub. Exotic dancers arrived, and though I got quite drunk, I refused to partake in the revelry. I retreated to the back of the room with a cigar, attempting to enjoy myself in my own way. After a few hours, the party began winding down. Some guests left, others paired off with dancers. I considered leaving as well, but then a stranger entered the room. He was tall and imposing, wearing all black except for a white shirt. His intense blue eyes seemed to pierce through me. He introduced himself as Tom, known for organizing good times from Pasadena to Kent Island. Tom was a peculiar character with a unique proposition. Our conversation took a philosophical turn, discussing hopes, worries, and regrets. Tom pulled out an intricate silver lighter with a crow and sunflowers engraved on it. He began talking about getting answers to life's questions through his lighter, and the others became intrigued. Amid the drunken banter, Tom's offer took on a life of its own. People began asking him questions, seeking insights into their lives. When my turn came, I hesitated but ended up asking a question that haunted me. How to save my wife. Tom agreed to provide an answer, but it would cost me. He lit the blue flame on his lighter and asked if I submitted to the price. I complied, and suddenly the room was filled with a surreal energy. As others asked their questions, the situation turned bizarre. One by one, the men who had asked questions underwent a gruesome transformation. Their bodies contorted, broke, and twisted in ways that defied reality. Their faces contorted in agony and ecstasy as their bodies shattered. It was a nightmare beyond imagination. Amidst the chaos, I saw Tom's malevolent grin and piercing eyes. He seemed to be reveling in the grotesque spectacle. When he focused on me, his anger became palpable. I pleaded for my life, but he was intent on extracting his price. Suddenly there was a crack, and darkness consumed me. I woke up in the midst of chaos and flames. The party venue was ablaze, and the last thing I remembered was being held by Stranger Tom. People were shouting, and I was dragged out by someone as the fire raged around us. Later, I learned that the fire was attributed to the partygoers' recklessness. It was easy to pin the blame on them, especially given the setting. Sammy's worried face greeted me as I regained consciousness. The official story was that I had been injured in the fire, but the truth was far more bizarre. I've shared this tale to warn others of Stranger Tom's dangerous games. He preys on people's curiosity and desperation, offering answers to life's biggest questions at a terrible price. He's still out there, lurking on the fringes of parties, waiting for vulnerable moments to strike. Remember, there's wisdom in the old adage, never talk to strangers.